Okay guys, it's officially 2021. We're starting a new year. So here's my question. Where are my Hemi fans out there? How does a 5.7 liter Gen 4 Hemi compare to the truck engines from GM? Let's find out. In this video, we're going to take a look at a comparison between a Gen 4 5.7 liter Hemi truck motor, courtesy of the guys at Engine Masters, Dave and Steve over there. We're going to take that motor and compare it to a number of offerings from GM, most notably an L83 direct injected 5.3 liter, and then a couple of 6 liters. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the L86 6.2 liter combination, but that's a much bigger motor, and I don't know if that would be a good comparison to the 5.7 liter Hemi, but I've never run one anyway, so we cannot take a look at that. But if you're a Hemi guy and you want to see more Hemi information like this, I have a whole playlist, as a matter of fact, 2 of them dedicated to Hemi stuff. I'll go ahead and put a link right up here to the naturally aspirated Hemi modifications, and then I will put another link right up here on the turbocharged nitrous and supercharged Hemi stuff. So if you want to see more Hemi stuff, check those out. But let's get to our test and find out how well that Gen 4 Hemi actually does. I want to start off this comparison by thanking the guys over at Engine Masters, that's David Freiberger and Steve Dulcich and Steve Brule, for allowing me to use this dyno data. This is a test that they did actually for Engine Masters, and it was on a late model Gen 4 5.7 liter Hemi motor. Now the cool thing about that motor, but first off, let me tell you, I can directly compare this stuff to the test that I've run. It's run on the same dyno, it's run in the same configuration, and all of that allows me to run direct comparisons between this data and stuff that I've run on the same dyno. But the thing that I like about this Gen 4 Hemi is it has a lot going for it. The 3 big things that it has over the previous generation, and I'll go ahead and show you a comparison here, but if you want to take a look at the full video on that comparison, it's up, so check it out. It's right here. But this particular Hemi, the Gen 4 stuff, has 3 things going for it. 1, it has variable cam timing, which makes for a broader power curve. It also has very good cylinder heads, much better than the previous Gen 3 Hemi cylinder heads. These flow a lot more, so it allows the motor to make more power. The final thing is it has a dual runner intake. Again, that's something that's going to broaden the power curve because you have long runners and short runners, more power everywhere. But let's take a look. First of all, let's see how this thing compared actually to the previous generation Hemi. So this thing run with long tube headers and the dual runner intake, optimized cam timing, and obviously optimized ignition timing and air fuel and stuff, the same way that we always do it on the engine dyno. It produced 439 horsepower and a very impressive 454 foot or 53 foot-pounds of torque. So take a look. It's got a really broad power curve. It's got good peak power, and for a 5.7 liter, this thing actually is pretty healthy. But here's a comparison to give you a quick idea. This is the power curve offered by the previous Gen 3 5.7 liter Hemi. This was, again, another used wrecking yard motor, just like the Gen 4 is, but it produced 381 horsepower and 420 foot-pounds of torque. And while that's no slouch because it had pretty good heads and a decent camshaft and a fairly good long runner intake manifold, it just does not compare to the power output of the Gen 4 Hemi, which has all of those things going for it. But now that we've taken a look at this, let's take a look and see how this Gen 4 5.7 liter Hemi compares to some of the stuff from GM. The first comparison we're going to look at is the Gen 4 5.7 liter Hemi compared to a Gen 5 5.3 liter L83 truck motor from GM. And I know what you're thinking, that's not a fair comparison. It's a 5.7 versus a 5.3. Well, here's the problem with comparing the 5.7 liter Hemi to the offerings from GM. We have either a 5.3 liter to choose from or a 6.2 liter. So unfortunately, GM offers something both smaller and bigger. And unfortunately, I don't have any test data on the 6.2 liter yet. I haven't got one of those truck motors and run it on the dyno and done modifications in the way that we have with the smaller 5.3 liter. So that's what we're going to take a look at it. But fear not, GM guys. We're also going to take a look at a couple of 6 liter combinations that have more displacement than this 5.7 liter Hemi. So here is our 5.7 liter Gen 4 Hemi, 439 horsepower and 453 foot-pounds of torque. And here's how it compares to a 5.3 liter L83. Not surprisingly, it has the 5.3 liter has less displacement. So it basically has less power kind of everywhere. But if you take a look at the 5.3 liter, I'm actually very impressed by that motor because it has a lot of things that the previous Gen 3 and Gen 4 5.3 liters did not have, which it makes it actually closer to this 5.7 liter, which is very good. Makes it closer than it otherwise would be. Now, the L83 compared to the previous Gen 4 stuff has more static compression. It has variable cam timing, which was also available in some applications on the Gen 4 stuff, but it has variable cam timing. It has good cylinder heads, which if you had a rec port 5.3 liter back in the day, which they never offered, it would have been good, but these cylinder heads are probably better than a cathedral port head. Direct injection, more compression, better cylinder head. It also has a very good intake manifold, and obviously it also has direct injection, which may or may not be a power thing depending on how you look at it, but it does improve the efficiency and mileage and that kind of stuff. So the 5.3 liter L83 is a good motor. I like it. It has a lot of cool stuff going for it. I can't wait till I can get together with somebody that has all of the necessary fuel things that I need so that we can actually run boost on it. But here's how that compares. The 5.3 liter L83 produced 403 horsepower, which, as you know, all of the other 5.3 liter stuff that we've run in the past from the Junkyard, those are much closer to 350 horsepower. And they're nowhere near this much torque. They're about 385 foot-pounds, but this thing makes 431 foot-pounds. So a lot like the 5.7 liter Hemi, the L83 from GM is a really good upgrade from the previous generations. But this 5.3 liter compared to the 5.7 liter Hemi just really doesn't have enough displacement. And it also doesn't have a variable intake runner, which I would like to see, which I think could further expand and broaden the power curve offered by the 5.3 liter. That's one thing I'd really like about the 5.7 liter Hemi. It has variable cam timing, which is good, and it also has multiple runner lengths, which is always a good idea. So now let's take a look and see how this 5.7 liter Hemi compares to maybe some larger LS offerings, both of them 6 liters. So if a 5.3 liter L83 is no match for the Gen 4 5.7 liter Hemi, what about a 6 liter? Now I have a couple of 6 liters to take a look at. The first one basically is a rebuilt LQ4 combination, and we have our Hemi here with 439 horsepower and 453 foot-pounds. And here's a comparison to basically a rebuilt 6 liter LQ4. So that means that it has compression is in the 9-to-1 or so, or in the mid-9s. It's got a 317 head. It's got the factory truck intake manifold on it. This was run with headers like all of the rest of these were. It had an optimized tune, and it was run under the same conditions, basically. But as we see, even though the stock 6-liter does fairly well, it is still down quite a bit, even given its additional displacement compared to the smaller 5.7 liter. It still cannot match either the torque output, and we ran this thing down at 32 or 3,300 RPM. Now maybe down at 2,000, that might be a different story. But we have a difference. This thing made, as a point of reference, made about 405 horsepower and 439 foot-pounds of torque. So it did okay, but it doesn't have a number of things that the 5.7 liter Hemi does. It doesn't have variable cam timing. It doesn't have a variable intake manifold. It has less compression. It's just not, and the cylinder head's a 317 cylinder head, the flow rate of the 317 cathedral port head compared to the Hemi head, it's just not even close. So it's missing a lot of things that the later version does. And obviously this is what happens. Technology marches on and the engines get better and better, but we're comparing something that has considerably more, well, it has somewhat more displacement compared to the 5.7 liter. But even that combination, even that 6 liter LS, the LQ4, now an LQ9 with a little bit more compression might be a little bit better cylinder head. It also has a little bit more camshaft, so it probably would be a lot closer, at least in the middle part here and in the torque range. But it's not going to make this kind of power output. It just doesn't have that. So now let's take a look and see. We have the final comparison is another 6 liter, but it's actually an LY6 and not an LQ4. So let's see how the rec port headed version actually compares to the 5.7 liter Hemi. The final comparison is the Gen 4 5.7 liter Hemi compared to a Gen 4 LY6 6 liter LS motor. So here is our Hemi once again. And if we take a look at our LY6, which is basically kind of a 6 liter truck version of an LS3. It features a 6-liter displacement. It has an LY6 rec port cylinder head, so very similar to an LS3. It just doesn't have the same valves. It also has a truck version of the LS3 rectangular port intake manifold, which flows every bit as well and makes the same power as an LS3. It's just a truck version. So that combination works very well. Now on this LY6, you can see it made more torque in past 4,000 RPM all the way out to 5,700 RPM. It made 443 horsepower, so a little bit more than the peak power offered by the 5.7 liter. It made a little bit less down low, below 3,900 RPM. But here's something to think about. When I ran this LY6, we put the same camshaft that we ran in that LQ4. We put a fixed camshaft in it because we could not control the variable cam. I suspect that this Gen 4 LY6 with a factory variable cam would be able to have even more low speed power than the Hemi. So the Gen 4 LY6 with a variable cam, I think, is a match for, for this Gen 4 5.7 liter Hemi. And that's not really, that shouldn't come as a surprise really to too many people. It has really good cylinder heads. They flow a ton. I mean, those things flow 315 CFM, so they'll support a lot of power. If it has variable cam, I haven't done testing on that particular variable cam, but I suspect it would be every bit as powerful as this factory LQ4 camshaft. And because we can vary it, it's just going to make a lot more low speed and average power production. It has really good cylinder heads. It has a good intake manifold. So that 6-liter, that LY6, probably would be a match for the 5.7 liter. Now the only question is, I can't wait to take a look at a 6.2 liter L86 to see how that compares, and then also the bigger Hemi stuff, the 6.4 liter Hemi stuff. So that'll be interesting to test. I look forward to doing all of that stuff. Let's get to our conclusion. Okay guys, what do we learn in our comparison between the Gen 4 5.7 liter Hemi and all the offerings from GM? Here's my takeaway. Technology definitely improves the breed. I mean, just take a look. Things like variable cam timing, multiple runner lengths in the intake manifold, direct injection, more compression, more head flow, all of those things dramatically improve power. And they allow that Gen 4 Hemi to make a lot more power than the previous generation and even more than some of the GM offerings. But, and here's the thing, all of those things work great. But you know when they work really well? When you combine them with more displacement. Armature holder guys, make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. More testing coming up.